September the 25th, 1978, San Diego, California. The morning sun was already rising over the Pacific, bathing the city in golden light. Commuters filled the highways, children headed to school, and in the skies above, hundreds of flights passed through one of America's busiest air corridors. Among them was Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 182A Boeing 727 carrying 135 souls. None of them knew that, in just a few minutes, they would become part of one of the most shocking tragedies in American aviation history, an accident that hundreds saw unfolding in real time, and yet no one said a word. The Flight 182 departed Sacramento early that morning bound for San Diego with a stop in Los Angeles. It was a short, familiar route, nothing out of the ordinary. At the controls were Captain James McFerrin, a veteran pilot with over 17,000 flight hours, and First Officer Robert Fox, a young but experienced co-pilot. Also in the cockpit was Flight Engineer Martin Vanna, responsible for monitoring systems and assisting with checklists. Behind them were 127 passengers, businessmen, families, and a group of PSA employees commuting to work. The atmosphere on board was cheerful. PSA, known for its friendly California-style approach to flying, even had its own slogan, the world's friendliest airline. Flight attendants joked with regulars. Passengers settled in for the short hop down the coast. It was supposed to be routine. But in the same airspace that morning, unnoticed by most, a small single-engine Cessna 172 was flying its own route toward Lindbergh Field. The Cessna was being flown by David Boswell, a 35-year-old private pilot accompanied by his instructor, Martin Casey. They were practicing instrument approaches, a common exercise where pilots navigate using only cockpit instruments, not outside visuals. Air traffic control had cleared the Cessna to climb and maintain 3,500 feet, while PSA 182, descending for landing, was cleared to 2,600 feet. On paper, everything was safe. Their paths should not have crossed. But San Diego's airspace in the late 1970s was notoriously crowded. Military jets, private planes, and commercial traffic all crisscrossed the same skies, often separated by just a few hundred feet. One small mistake could erase that safety margin completely. The moment everything changed. At 9 a.m., PSA 182 was approaching from the northeast. The crew had visual contact with the Cessna ahead of them. "Traffic's in sight," the captain radioed to air traffic control. "We've got the little guy." Controllers acknowledged, trusting the experienced PSA crew to maintain visual separation. But inside the 727 cockpit, something subtle and deadly began to happen. As the Boeing descended and banked slightly right, the Cessna passed below and out of view, hidden by the aircraft's nose. The pilots thought they had passed it. In reality, the Cessna was now directly beneath and ahead of them. For nearly a minute, neither crew realized they were on a collision course. On the ground, dozens of San Diegans gazed, up construction workers, commuters, even school children, watching as two aircraft converged silently against the blue morning sky. Collision over San Diego. At 9:01:47 a.m., in an instant that changed aviation forever, saw Flight 182 slammed into the Cessna from above at more than 200 XL knots, nearly 300 miles per hour. The right wing of the 727 sliced through the Cessna like a blade, shredding it instantly. The smaller aircraft disintegrated in midair, its wreckage raining down over the North Park neighborhood. The impact tore open the Boeing's wing, igniting a massive explosion. Inside the 727, chaos erupted. A cockpit voice recorder would later capture the final haunting words of the crew: we're going down. I love you, Ma. Oh, oh, oh. Seconds later, PSA 182 rolled inverted and plunged toward the ground, leaving a flaming trail of jet fuel in its wake. At 9:02 a.m., the Boeing 727 slammed into a quiet residential neighborhood at the intersection of Dwight and Nile Streets. The impact was catastrophic. The explosion leveled 22 homes and killed all 135 people on board, plus 7 on 22, plus 7 on 22 tug. The ground. Witnesses described an inferno, so intense that cars and houses melted into the pavement. One resident, who barely escaped his burning home, later said it was like the end of the world. There was no sound, just fire everywhere. Firefighters and police rushed to the scene, but there was little they could do. The debris field stretched across several city blocks, and the air reeked of fuel and smoke. In the middle of it all lay the shattered remains of Flight 182, its distinctive SAW smile logo, now scorched beyond recognition. The city in shock. San Diego had never seen anything like it. The city's tight-knit community was devastated. Families who had been eating breakfast just minutes before now found their homes engulfed in flames. Schools were evacuated, and the city's hospitals overflowed with the injured and traumatized. In the hours that followed, news networks captured chilling images, the twisted fuselage lying across streets, rescuers carrying small fragments of the plane, and firefighters spraying what was left of the wreckage. Reporters spoke to witnesses who had seen the entire tragedy unfold from the ground. Many of them had watched the two planes approaching each other, knowing they were too close, but assumed air traffic control would intervene. One man told reporters, "We could see it. We knew they were going to hit, but what could we do? You just stood there and watched." It was this eerie helplessness, the fact that so many people saw it coming and said nothing, that gave rise to the haunting phrase, "They watched it happen and said nothing." The investigation. Within hours, the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, launched a full-scale investigation. They recovered the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorders from the wreckage, piecing together the crew's final minutes. The audio confirmed what investigators suspected. The pilots lost sight of the Cessna and mistakenly believed they had passed it. At one point, a flight engineer even warned, "I still have that traffic." But seconds later, the Cessna appeared suddenly beneath their nose, too late for evasive action. Air traffic control transcripts revealed another issue: controller overload. San Diego's terminal radar approach control tracking was handling multiple aircraft simultaneously. The controller responsible for SAE 182 had briefly shifted attention to another flight and didn't realize the 727 was descending into the Cessna's altitude. The NTSB's final report placed primary blame on PSA Flight 182's crew, citing failure to maintain visual separation. However, it also criticized the air traffic control system, noting poor communication, inadequate radar procedures, and a lack of technological safeguards. The human toll. Beyond the technical causes, the tragedy left deep emotional scars. Entire families were wiped out. Among the victims were PSA employees, military personnel, and even a photographer who captured haunting pictures of the final seconds before impact. Those photos, taken from the ground by a local news photographer, showed PSA 182 in a steep dive, its right wing ablaze, moments before striking the ground. They became some of the most famous and horrifying images in aviation history. In the years that followed, survivors and families of the victims fought for stricter airspace regulations. Many struggled with post-traumatic stress for decades. Residents who lived through the explosion described recurring nightmares of planes falling from the sky. The reforms that followed the PSA 182 disaster became a turning point in aviation safety. It exposed how vulnerable civilian air traffic was to one-co-PIS, mid-air collisions, especially in busy urban airspace. As a result, the Federal Aviation Administration FAA introduced sweeping reforms. Class B airspace was established around major airports, giving controllers greater separation authority. Transponder requirements became stricter for small aircraft. And most importantly, the Traffic Collision Avoidance System (TCAS) was developed, a revolutionary onboard radar system that automatically warns pilots of nearby aircraft and recommends evasive maneuvers. Today, TCAS is standard on nearly every commercial aircraft, and it has saved countless lives. In many ways, those 135 lives lost over San Diego changed aviation forever. PSA's fall and legacy. For Pacific Southwest Airlines, the tragedy was a wound from which it never fully recovered. Once known for its humor, bright orange uniforms, and iconic smiling livery, PSA became synonymous with the San Diego disaster. Though it continued flying for nearly a decade after the crash, its image never recovered. By 1988, PSA was absorbed into USAIR, disappearing from the skies entirely. But for aviation historians and safety experts, PSA 182 stands as a case study in human perception, communication failure, and the price of complacency. Every pilot who flies into congested airspace today owes part of their safety to the painful lessons learned that morning. The forgotten witnesses. Even decades later, survivors on the ground still recall the horror. One woman, a young mother at the time, remembered stepping outside just moments before the impact. "I looked up and saw the plane rolling. You could see faces in the windows, and then it was gone." For the people of North Park, the scars remain, visible not just in memory, but in the very layout of the streets. Where homes once stood, there are now memorial plaques and gardens. Every September, locals gather for a moment of silence, remembering those lost and honoring the firefighters who risked everything that day. The next time you see a plane gliding silently above the city, remember those 142 souls who never made it home and the message their loss left behind. In aviation, silence kills. Speak up, act fast. Because sometimes 1 minute of doubt can burn an entire city.